There are so many amazing horror movies that don't get seen because people don't talk about them. So today I'm counting down 6 genuinely underrated horror movies that most people don't talk about. Some are terrifying, others are psychological gut punches, and one of them has one of the most genuinely beautiful endings to any horror film I've ever seen. So my name's Rookie, I love horror movies, and here are 6 underrated horror movies that nobody talks about. So first up we have A Dark Song. This movie is absolutely devastating and intensely beautiful. The movie centers around this grieving woman who rents this isolated house in the middle of nowhere and hires this occultist to help her perform this ancient ritual. This ritual can take months, neither of them can leave, and if they fail, the consequences will be catastrophic. So for me, this movie feels like one of the most authentic occult horror movies ever made. Horror movies usually treat magic like some kind of joke or a gimmick, but A Dark Song is essentially a social realism film that just happens to feature magic. The rituals are meticulous, they are exhausting, and they are really unsettling. And this is all taking place in a world that feels like our world, so it makes it feel like this is happening and can happen. But this film isn't really about demons or magic, it's about grief. This woman starts this ritual because she wants answers, and she's sad, and she's grieving, like really intensely grieving, and this movie kind of turns into a really meaningful story about grief, about loss, about forgiveness, and about letting go. The entire movie is a metaphor for, the process of grieving and emotional repair, and it has one of the most powerfully beautiful endings I've ever seen in any modern horror film. Next up we have Calibre. This is one of the most intense psychological thrillers I have seen in years. The movie centers around these 2 lifelong friends who travel to the Scottish Highlands for a hunting trip, and after a tragic accident occurs, they make some terrible decisions. Decisions that spiral into a nightmare that becomes harder and harder to escape. So the reason I think that this falls under the radar for a lot of horror fans is because it's not the most overt horror movie out there. And for the most part, this is a British crime drama, but the events in this movie are horrific, and if films like Eden Lake are considered horror films, then Calibre is definitely a horror film. The dread in this film is very similar to Eden Lake. It's one of the most suspenseful and dread-filled psychological thrillers I've seen. And the real horror to this film are the consequences. The movie explores how ordinary people react under extreme pressure. And the movie asks us a very terrifying question. How far will we go to protect ourselves after we've made a terrible mistake? The movie is essentially a study on guilt and morality, and how quickly civilization breaks down when survival itself is threatened. It's incredibly dark, it's incredibly tense, packed full of amazing acting. You will white knuckle all the way through this film. Next up we have Enys Men. This horror movie is extremely underrated, but also incredibly divisive too. It is a movie that people either really love or really hate. So Enys Men centers around a wildlife volunteer who is living alone on this isolated island. She experiences really strange visions after monitoring a small patch of flowers. And the further the movie progresses, the more her reality starts to break down. This is a really bizarre, really surreal and slow-paced horror film, and because of that, a lot of people didn't get on with it, and I think that's why it's so underrated. People who are drawn to this type of horror will like this naturally. The film really isn't interested in explaining itself. It's closer to, an art installation than a horror film. And for me personally, this is where the movie gets really fascinating. The movie is obviously a metaphor for things like grief, isolation, and memory. But more importantly, I think that this is a film about Britain's relationship with its own past. The island itself seems trapped in time, and characters seem to exist in different eras simultaneously. And this all creates a sense that history is haunting the present. The film becomes less about the supernatural or the surreal things or the visions and more about psychological decay. Enys Men isn't going to be for everybody, but for those who are into this type of horror, I think you'll really dig it. Next up, we have 1922. This is one of the most quietly terrifying horror films released in the past 10 years that nobody really talks about. So 1922 is based on a Stephen King novella. The movie centers around this farmer who convinces his son to help him unalive his wife after she threatens to sell the farm. Now, we think that this movie is going to play out like a, crime drama or a, psychological thriller, and it is both of them things. But then it takes a turn. I won't spoil it for you, but yeah, this movie is not what you expect it to be. So this film was completely overshadowed by Gerald's Game, another Stephen King adaptation that was released around the same time. Everybody was talking about Gerald's Game, and rightly so. It's an incredible film, but I think 1922 is just as good as Gerald's Game, because I think that this is one of the darker Stephen King adaptations we've had. So essentially, this entire film is about guilt. We're watching a guy psychologically destroy himself after he's convinced himself that he was justified in doing what he did. But we also have other central themes like trauma, paranoia, toxic masculinity, and greed running through this movie. It's a film packed full of symbolism and really terrifying imagery. So if you like, dark supernatural horror movies, this is definitely one you're going to want to check out. Next up, we have Apartment 143. Now, for those of you who like found footage horror movies or more traditionally scary horror movies, this is a film I think you should check out because it's incredibly underrated. The film centers around a group of paranormal investigators who move into this apartment where increasingly violent supernatural events are happening. We get all the classic kind of haunting supernatural things in this movie, while this team of paranormal investigators are trying to document what's going on. It has some genuinely scary moments, it has some genuinely creepy imagery, and more people need to talk about this one. So after the release of Paranormal Activity, we started to get a lot of found footage horror movies, and that found footage boom produced a lot of really forgettable films, and I think that's why this movie got buried. But unlike a lot of the found footage movies that were released around this time, this one feels surprisingly authentic for a movie that is based on ghosts. The investigators in this film behave like real people, like actual professionals that know what they're doing. They use a wide range of different technologies and equipment, and for a found footage horror movie released around this time that a lot of people don't talk about, it's got some pretty good acting in it too. Now, I love found footage horror movies, and I watch them knowing that they're not the best films in the world, but I watch these types of movies when I want to be really scared. So it is disappointing when you do come across a found footage horror movie and it's not very good and it doesn't scare you. That is not the case with this film. This film is good and it will scare you. Hopefully, it scared me. And finally, we have 2004's Creep. Now, this is an incredibly brutal horror movie. So the film is set almost entirely in the London Underground, and it centers around this woman who falls asleep after missing her train. And when she wakes up, she is alone, the station is locked up, she is completely deserted, and something is stalking her through the tunnels. And what starts out as a claustrophobic survival thriller turns into something far darker and far more brutal than you would ever expect. The reason I think this movie is lesser known is because it came out in the early 2000s, and I think that a lot of people just assumed it was another early 2000s creature feature, but this film is so much more than that. The film uses the London Underground like a haunted house. It uses the tunnels, and they become almost like a character themselves. Every tunnel feels oppressive, filthy, and endless. It is one of the best examples out there of urban horror because, the setting itself becomes terrifying. Not to mention just how brutal this film is. I rewatched this film recently in preparation for this video, and I forgot how brutal this film gets. Now, you can interpret this film as a sort of meditation on society's forgotten people, because the creature in this film isn't just a monster. He was a person, and he is the product of neglect. And he is hidden beneath a city full of people who never look down. And the film is constantly contrasting, wealthy, privileged Londoners with London's forgotten people. It's dark, it's brutal, it's intense, and one of the most underrated horror films from the early 2000s. So there we have it, 6 underrated horror movies that almost nobody talks about anymore. Now, if you've seen any of these horror movies, let me know in the comments below which one you think deserves more attention. And if you have an underrated horror movie that never gets mentioned, drop it in the comments below, because I'm always looking for underrated hidden gems. And if you like this video or into horror movie deep dives or discovering horror movie hidden gems, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm aiming for 2 YouTube videos like this a week, so there's going to be plenty more to come. Don't forget to be nice to people, and don't forget to be nice to yourself. See you later.